Well, welcome to the first episode of the Digital State podcast. What Asad and I are trying to do now is to start a conversation with loads of people around government procurement, around the use of tech in government, how we can get involved more, both as SMEs, as larger companies, government themselves improving their procurement systems as well. But it's also not just for the actual strategy of how to do business within government to improve digital. It's how SMEs outside that ecosystem are going to get the benefit of a better government digital state. It's how taxpayers are going to get the benefit of better public services and more productive government through this sort of process. So I'm Paul Scully. I was the Minister for Technology in the last government, Minister for Business as well. So I've seen it from the government side. And I've run businesses myself for 25 years. So I have a commercial mindset, I suppose. Having done politics and minister for 4 years, I've really seen both sides. But Asad.
Thank you, Paul. And I'm Asad Ansari, co-host with Paul Scully here. I lead a small business called Mayfair IT Consultancy, and we are right in the middle of helping deliver these transformation programs for government. And that's in partnership with larger service integrators, also known as strategic suppliers into government. So as a small business, we focus on 3 areas: data, AI, and infrastructure security. So that allows us a breadth of knowledge and capability across working on these large-scale transformation programs for, as Paul said, better public service. Alongside that, I serve as an advisor for the Royal Air Force, for the Ministry of Defence, and for the UK Foreign Office.
I think the point is in this episode, as I say, we're looking quite heavily on procurement this time around, and
That's right.
working within digital in government. Government spends billions of pounds on technology, but doesn't always spend it right, and it doesn't always get the outcomes that we as taxpayers want, frankly. So it's really good to explore how that happens, why programs underdeliver. But it's not all negative. We want to find some solutions for that as well. Now, obviously, for your SME background, that's something of particularly pertinent to you because you're there agile as a small business. That's right. It's how you bring innovation into what can otherwise be a slightly pedestrian process.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, as a small business, trying to navigate around huge frameworks that are there. And of course, they're there to make life easier to work with government across frameworks, but it makes it difficult for smaller businesses that might be operating at the lower end of the SME spectrum, and they just don't have the credentials or use cases to try and get themselves on the frameworks. That's often quite a key challenge for businesses. Not just that, having the capability to do bid writing, as well as trying to run the business, as well as trying to manage finances, HR functions, internal other optics that you have as a small business. The key word there is challenge. And of course, we'll discuss here today with our guest, how can we get around these and what exactly we are doing as an organization as well to find success in working further.
Another thing is with running an SME, you often work for your business. You don't often have time to step back and work on your business and make sure that you can actually do the stuff that actually the long-term thinking, actually have thinking time. And when you're writing tenders and procurement documents and whatever, it can be difficult to keep on top of. I remember when I was running a business, nothing to do with technology, but we were working with trying to get on the tender framework of a big bank. And they work like government. When they get to the certain size, they're just like government anyway in the bureaucracy. And it took me 3 years to get on the framework. They were asking questions that were nowhere near any relevance of my business or what I was wanting to do for them. By the time I got on the framework, I was actually elected as an MP, so I couldn't even run my business anymore. That was all a waste of time. But 3 years of my life, I'm never.
No, I'll mention it now. So one of the ways where small businesses do look at is through that partnership angle, because large organizations have delivered critical programs and are delivering critical programs for government. They've got it right in a lot of cases. And I think that's what we want to go into. How has that happened? Where has that got to from a large strategic supply perspective and in partnership with the smaller business? What are the secret sources?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, let's introduce our guest because it's going to be really interesting to see the dynamic because you obviously are working as a small business in an SME in government and public sector technology transformation. And Kevin O'Neill, Kevin, you are the Vice President and Director of business in CGI, a very large business in terms of public sector work in this area. You've been really successful at in government and justice in particular. I think you're really developing at scale this kind of business. So your insight and the two of your insights are going to be really interesting to see how they contrast. So welcome to the
Thank
to the
you
podcast.
for inviting me. I'm pretty excited. I think this is going to be an interesting conversation. It's an incredibly complex topic, and there are so many different facets to it. So, taking to Assad's point, is there a secret sauce? I'm not sure there is. I think there's a lot, it's the 47 ingredients that go in. There's lots and lots of different secret sauces, but I think we're probably going to explore a few.
Well, let's start with the positive. I mean, what do you think is really going well? What's government getting right? What's procurement? What's right about procurement at the moment?
So I think what we're going to talk about is IT and technology procurement, because I think we can kind of get lost when we talk about procurement. Actually, when government looks at procurement, there's construction, there's outsourcing services, there's lots of different types of services. And what government has done really well over the last few years, I think, is trying to establish both playbooks and frameworks which help the buyers within departments understand who the really relevant people are for those services. Because that's not easy when you've got a massive supply chain out in the economy and everybody says they can do everything. That filtering that happens when you look at the frameworks like the bank, for instance, that's crucial for the departments when they're looking to make some almost pre-procurement decisions, actually. So I think that filtering system has worked really well. Getting a common state of understanding amongst the commercial community under CCS and the new GCA, the upskilling that's gone on in anywhere up to 30,000 civil servants that are being upskilled from a commercial perspective to help them be better buyers.
Yeah,
I mean that's been a really profound training program which the Cabinet Office have led and spearheaded over the last six years or so. And I think it is making a difference in terms of the consistency, and therefore I think the way that it is buying is better. I think it still has quite some distance still to travel when we start looking at what the outcomes want to be. And sometimes they're still not quite aligned really in terms of the business alignment versus what the procurement setup is, but it's getting increasingly better.
So we'll look at I've got to flip it around now and start looking at why sometimes they're not going right. But actually, it was interesting to pick up on what you were talking about, upskilling, because you're absolutely right. There is no reason, say, pick up a delivery department like the Foreign Office or something like that, when they're not delivering frontline services. There is no reason really why someone in the Foreign Office should have a business ethos background, because they've got no training in it. They've come into it because of geopolitics, because of diplomacy and whatever, and worked up through the ranks. So it's no one's fault. It's just a fault on the system.
Yeah.
So if upskilling's happening, that's really good. Do you think though that government still needs more digital know-how from maybe the outside coming in?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two things. I think there is a scheme where they've been looking at secondments for private sector into civil servant roles. I think to bring that industry experience, which I think is invaluable. There's also part of the job specs for DGs and perm secs now is they are supposed to have a digital understanding, because there's a lot of research that the NAO have done looking at the correlation between successful outcomes and having a digitally savvy perm sec DG. It's pretty high.
Do you think they can actually match them though, price wise? I mean, because in the open market, government can't really compete with private sector.
No, and I think that is part of the challenge. So I think it is upskilling, and generally they'll come from policy backgrounds. And so I've worked with lots of SROs and senior civil servants over the years who haven't, IT isn't their skill set. They are policy policy folks making important decisions for the country, and therefore helping them understand what decisions they need to make and helping them make them from an IT perspective is something that we almost have to be advisory to, whilst also at the same time trying to deliver to them. So there's a kind of a strange juxtaposition of relationship that we have. So we're trying to help some parts of organisation upskill from a digital perspective, whilst also delivering at the same time. And there's definitely road still to go on.
To do that. I mean, it's interesting as well because you often, as a larger company, will work and take on smaller businesses to help you deliver the programs and stuff. But then I suppose it's an extra step for those government officials that are doing it. I mean, maybe to you, Asad, as all like the procurement officers to actually get the benefit of the agility of SMEs, but not necessarily having the ethos and the breadth of capacity to actually.
I think that ethos, it lends itself from the level of governance you need, the level of legality, specific financial figures that you'd have to meet. And that's exactly where a large global SI like CGI comes in, where they are managing a lot of that conversation with government. Like as Kamin rightly said, they're almost advising them and delivering for them at the same time. So that's the day-to-day sort of that's happening. Behind that, you've got frameworks that you're sitting, and then behind that, you've got CGI and their teams that are going and putting the bids in. That's where we come in as an SME organization, where we'll partner on the bids that CGI is doing, and that's where we bring our agility and then quickness to market. One of the early programs that we worked with CGI on, I remember we needed to help deliver a data specialist team for one of the key critical programs that the UK has running right now, and we were able to do that in a matter of 2 weeks or so. But that also lent itself to CGI being understanding as an organization and allowing us that space to come in as a small, small business at that time, and working with us genuinely in partnership to say, guys, okay, this is what we need your help to deliver on this program. Can you bring that in? How does that turn around? So as a small organization, we didn't have to worry about, we have to bid for this work, or we need to meet certain financial figures, or it's a central government client, example 6, a cabinet office, and it'll be very difficult for us. A lot of that was managed pre us sort of coming on the program with all the hard work that CGI had done. So it enabled us as an organization to be agile, be quick, and just ready to deliver, as opposed to looking after all the other functions that we'd need to try to go for a direct award.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know the McDonald's. I used to have a client that ran a lot of McDonald's in the UK as a franchise holder, and McDonald's have gone down that route in recent years. I know there's digressing from technology, very much so. But the point is, actually, they found that actually having a franchise model, obviously, it meant they were lighter in their back office, but it meant that they got the benefit of agility and innovation from lots and lots of different factors, rather than just the groupthink of one big.
And I think what's interesting is we've seen an evolution over the years where the big prime SIs, quite famous probably back in the 90s, big monolithic programs, probably weren't perceived as delivering value for money at the time. And so what we saw was a shift towards breaking those contracts down, augmenting the role of SMEs within the supply chain into delivery for departments. But I think all of that happened without necessarily being ahead of the upskilling and the capacity that departments needed to manage those numbers of suppliers, because there is an overhead that comes with working, especially with Asad. It's a big overhead.
Yeah.
And so actually, when we look at the way in which we work with our partner ecosystems, everybody has a special purpose, and we try and work with a small number of really trusted partners who will understand where we're going with certain programs. And we do resource up, we do resource down, depending on whatever the needs of our clients are. And from my perspective, that brings different voices in, it brings some different innovation in, it brings skills and potentially capacity areas that we don't have intrinsically within the organization. So from my point of view, it's really a win-win for the department to get the capacity. From my perspective, I don't have the risk of taking on another several hundred people that I may not need if projects move away. And so everybody gets a bit of slice of the pie. And that's the way we've tried to work it over the last few years. And, where we have programs that have come to us literally in weeks and said, can you get up to, we're going to need a couple of hundred people within 3 or 4 months. That's difficult to do as a single organization. You can do it.
Yeah.
But actually we look and see how can we leverage our partner ecosystems to help us create that and spread the risk as well. And it works well.
So it's a lot for you to manage that relationship, because you are, I suppose, in some ways, first filter for government, because there's no way government can.
We're the ones they can tap.
Hundreds. Well, there is that as well. You're going to come back to the exact. But it's this idea, because there's no way the government, and I remember when I was a local councillor, and I've seen it local authorities, seen it definitely in central government, there's no way they can deal with thousands of SMEs.
No.
So often they need an SI to corral them. That's why it's called an SI, a system integrator. You're integrating systems, but you're also integrating the supply chain below that as well. I remember when I was on aviation minister, when Nadeem Zahawi was out jabbing the nation, doing the vaccine, I took on some of his work as well. And I remember going to the Midlands, speaking to the primes, the aviation primes there.
Yeah.
And they were saying, don't worry, no, we've got a great relationship with our SME supply chain. I then went down the road and spoke to some of the SMEs and right.
That's what they think.
How do you manage that relationship?
So what we try and do is effectively say our framework at the start is, this is what we think your slice of the pie looks like. And what we try and do is keep to that commitment. Sometimes it will flex up because we can't, as Asad was saying on some of the data side, we weren't quite as swift as we could have been in those areas. So, we were like Asad and one or two others help us in that space. But what we try and be is, we try and be transparent with what we think the slice looks like. But also, and when we do move into a world where we are saying, actually, we need to start getting some of our own folks in there, we're also doing that in a transparent way. And this isn't necessarily about replacing partner ecosystem. It's about making sure that everybody's got the slice that we look at, because as the SI, we take a huge amount of cost, just in things like cash management and all of the things that go alongside running a business. And therefore, we have to have a certain proportionality of folks on the pitch at any one time. And that's just the discussions that we have with all of our ecosystem.
But that's actually quite an interesting point in itself for SMEs, because, when I'm looking at trying to work out how to get more SMEs when I was in government in that position, we always say sometimes it's easy to think that the big companies are just taking something off the top coming in. But you're saying you have to do that because you're taking some risk. You've got the back office stuff and these contingencies and those kind of things in it.
I mean, just look at things like some of the billing and invoicing on the big programs. That in itself is almost a full-time job because of the way that we have to, put the invoices in, justify people's time. Timesheets inevitably become challenged, and then we have to have the discussion. And sometimes, payments can get delayed, and so we end up carrying debt for a little while. That costs money. So all of these things are part of the cost of running the business. And most of our contracts are open book as well. So departments have got the right to come in and check what profit margins we're making and ensure they're not excessive, which they're not.
How do you manage your relationship as an SME with the primes and the SIs that you work with?
I think it's been very much on what's the value that we can bring as a smaller organization, because we're quite focused in 3 specific areas that we help CGI and others in. That's what sort of put us in that, let's call upon IT for these specific areas, as opposed to if I went in and said, we can do everything under the sun. That just doesn't work. That confuses large organizations more than anything else, because they need pockets of specialist organizations. We need data. Okay, let's go for Mayfair IT and other companies here. We need digital, software engineering, etc., cyber, and so on and so forth. So that's what helped us. I mean, the first conversation, gentleman in Kevin's team, Anthony, when we had, that's literally the message we said. And Anthony turned around and said, we spoke to another organization a couple of days ago. They said they can do everything. And I just couldn't place them in my mental box to see where they could actually help us. So from there, early on, we just made sure we focused on what is that we're bringing. Is that something relevant to that organization? CGI, it was, and it works well for us.
I think Anthony's just looked up his smart speaker, having been mentioned on the podcast, and always, cool. We were just talking about Kevin, but no. So it's interesting then. I mean, because I think we looked at the expertise within government when you were asked about technology and things, but does it also extend to, or lack of expertise, to sometimes government coming up with a solution rather than an outcome? So it's a predetermined solution rather than the outcome of what they actually want to achieve long term. Do they actually know all the time what they're trying to specify? Yeah.
I mean, it's a really complex question because we see so many tenders right across central government, and there are varying qualities. Some from very good, some to fairly poor. So for instance, we've seen people asking for a SaaS product that want immense amounts of customization and other requirements, which effectively don't make it a SaaS product. It's effectively wanting a COTS product, but actually what it's come out to market for is a SaaS product. And so you try and have those conversations that says this really isn't a SaaS thing you want. And so where a lot of the playbook is trying to take departments now is how can they gauge industry's expertise in terms of how they're coming up with those, let's call them solutions/outcomes, because they can be two different things, or they are two different things. But in that innovation space, that's the area really where the opportunity comes for innovation. Because once the contracts are done, really difficult to write in innovation into contracts, because by their very nature, they are neatly packaged devices, which is you're going to do this thing for 5 years or 6 years or 3 years, whatever the number is. So actually, when the incentive for doing innovation with a capital I is almost impossible once you're in a contract. I mean, they do get written in, and there are things that happen, but I would say it was innovation with a little I, not a big I.
Yeah.
And that needs to come. That almost needs to come pre-procurement and getting industries thinking. And I think lots of folks are trying to be helped with thinking about how they engage with industry before they get to that stage. Because, there's a lot of people frightened as well for those engagements because they think we're going to try and sell. And there are lots of times when I'll get to something and we'll have a conversation and I'll say, well, you could shape it this way, but that's not us.
Yeah.
That's not us. That's somebody else. And that's fine, because I'd rather not go for a project or a program that I know we can't do and isn't going to build our reputation within the department, but we're happy to give the advice. So it's that pre-procurement stage, I think, where the real innovation can happen.
At the end of the day, because you're not, you are a commercial business, and so you can't sit there. You can do so much to take government along this way, but you're not going to do it if there's no return, no benefit for the shareholders, etc. And that approach. Does that get worse with the growth of AI? In terms of the fact that if, and I know we can't mention anything.
All right, we've done, 15 minutes?
Yeah, exactly. With AI, exactly. Time flies a lot longer than that as well. But in terms of the fact that, with the speed of technology and therefore the speed of demand, can government ever keep up with that speed of development in terms of you talking about time and the complexity of coming up with the right question for the tender? Is that going to get worse?
Oh, for sure. For a period of time. And I mean, AI is traveling at such a speed that even industry, when we see different LLMs coming out, week after week from Anthropic and, OpenAI and the likes, and they've all got, materially improved powers. We as an industry have had to sit and think, how do we use this? How do we use this powerful thing to do something that's beneficial? And that's happening really, really fast at the moment. And so I think we are understanding how to use AI for an efficiency perspective. It is the most overhyped thing I think I've seen in my career, but it's possibly also the most impactful. So I think it's both things at the same time. There's some considerations around things like security and how it's applied from a departmental perspective. I think when you then start looking in the self-coding tools like Codex, and you then introduce a whole range of new options around, citizen developer things, and do you actually make your existing shadow estate IT problem even worse?
Yeah.
Because people are building these new systems. So I think there's some governance questions that we're all, and this is both industry and departmental sides, are having to ask ourselves about how do we use this thing? And the one thing as our teams go through it is, it seems to be the magic answer for everything, AI, but it is not a magic rewrite kit. And I think there are too many people at the moment implying that it is, and it isn't.
It's a crutch for having a simple answer.
Yeah, it's an incredibly powerful tool that is helping us do things much faster and with fewer people.
Yeah, but you still need a human in the loop.
You still need, we did some work recently where one of my best guys did something extraordinary in about 2 weeks. We thought it would take a team of 8 about 10 weeks. he did it in 2 weeks by himself. And I said, oh, isn't that impressive? And he said, yeah, but that's 37 years as a coder has made that I know how to drive the tools to give me the outcome that we need. And I think, that analogy shouldn't be lost, because I don't think you can then just throw people at the problem and it solves it, because I don't think it will.
Yeah, absolutely.
But what it can do, and what I think it will do, and we're doing some of this at the moment, is it can be a real enabler for the modernization of the legacy estate. Yeah. I think that's the most powerful benefit that AI has right across government. Is I think it can really help with modernizing. And we've got a couple of things, big programs that we're doing at the moment with some of the major departments, looking at how we retire the legacy, and we're using AI tools to help them do that. And these things are 20, 25 years old in some instances, so they're challenging things to understand. But that's the real opportunity, I think.
I think from a government perspective, that's where CGI excel really well on the legacy programs, and that's a lot of the work that you're doing. And then the OpenAI partnership that you've got globally, that's lending itself quite positively for the UK's digital state.
Yeah, unquestionably. And we're really keen to put hackathon sessions around with departments partnering up with OpenAI, so they'll come with us and almost take a problem and see what we can do. And we've done that with a couple of departments recently, where we've sort of thrown a problem and seen how we can do a bit of vibe coding, get teams together, and honestly, what they can produce in a couple of days is materially different to what we could have done even 5 years ago.
I know Paul can go to the quick fire questions, but I've got one just now. So how is your vibe coding going?
Let's go with I'm at the basic end.
One is better than none.
My team are having to teach me how to do it, but I'm learning.
Well, look, we can't let you go away without just having a quick fire.
Yeah.
So don't have to think about it too long. But one big tech success story for you or CGI.
Well, let's do two. Let's do two. So I was fortunate enough to be part of the current account switching program when that was put together a number of years ago, and it involved all of the major banks, building societies, Visa, MasterCard, etc. And it was all about enabling the consumer experience around switching bank accounts, which was about 39 days. I think the average was 39 days. Treasury wanted to create a better consumer experience around switching, make it more like utilities. And the solution that was come up with was to do the 7-day current account switch scheme. So we ran the central team, who effectively hub and spoked with all of the banks, building societies, and implemented the scheme with all the marketing through the Payments Council. And from first meeting to implementation was 2 years. And there was about £2 billion spent across industry, and affected that consumer change. And that for me was a really great example of where government set the standards of what it wants, and then industry went and did it.
That's really good.
And that was really neat. I'm super proud of what we did on that one. And then from a government perspective, I don't think this gets the plaudits that it should. GDS, right? If we think back to the pre-GDS, very disconnected services, different consumer experience, how citizens interacted with different departments was materially different depending on what they were trying to do. Whereas the introduction of the service design and all the service standards that go with it, the user experience was being brought more to the front. So now, whilst citizens will still complain about it, because I don't think that's natural human behaviour, it's a vastly better experience than what it was pre-GDS days. I think they've still got some opportunities for integration that goes further down the line and makes it a more seamless experience for the citizen. So how do you make it a more rounded citizen experience, rather than you're clearly being fed off to the department? The driving licenses, passport office, the photos is a great example of where data exchange between departments can be really well used to make the citizens' life a little bit easier. I think there's that ability to be forward thinking about how we do that for UK citizens.
Cool. Most overused word or phrase in digital transformation terms?
Agile.
Agile.
Just twice. Agile.
I've used it a few times.
I say that only in that it's. I think it's got better. The maturity of it has increased. But there was a stage that it went through was agile meant I didn't need to know my requirements. So I could do whatever I wanted to do and change my mind whenever I want to change it. And it doesn't cost me anything.
Yeah.
And all the principles we had of sound project management and project delivery kind of went out the window, and an industry, I think, were as complicit in this as anybody, because we'll all have across the industry horror stories of where we've lost lots of money on fixed priced agile projects. And I think they're still happening today, but I know we don't do them. So we don't do fixed price agile.
Yeah.
Because it's a recipe to, frankly, not only lose money, but have really unhappy clients.
What about one myth about procurement?
I don't know if I'd call it a myth, but the one thing I would love to see is really tighter engagement between SROs of programs and the business.
Yeah.
Because I think better outcomes are delivered that way. And I know it is something that the Cabinet Office are looking at, because I think, when you start looking at the outcomes, I don't think it's in question that the more capable SRO that's got a digital mindset that is involved in the procurement is more likely to get what they need and what they want. So for me, it's not quite a myth, but that's the one thing I'd probably love to see.
What about a technology that government should invest more in?
I'm doing a good job of not answering every question. I'm going to change. I'm going to change the question slightly. A little politician. It's not necessarily a technology, but I think there needs to be a better view about how it deals with the legacy challenge. We know, government knows it's a major problem. At the Tech UK board that I sit on, we did a study looking at the cost of it, and we've estimated it to be about £34 billion a year in the cost of legacy. So actually, having a plan to try and retire as much of the legacy as possible, biggest bang for buck. How do we use AI to turn off some of the more expensive legacy ones? I mean, it's not simple at all, but I think the economic return are simply too big to avoid.
Don't always think about the investment, actually getting rid of sunk costs or something like that. You need to get rid of something.
Yeah, because a lot
spend to pay.
Exactly. I mean, a lot of legacy systems are very expensive to run.
Yeah.
The risk in running them is huge because, some of them, I know there are some systems that still run on Oracle, 11G, which is 25 years old sort of thing. And there are fewer and fewer people that know how to operate those systems. So I think that's its real opportunity.
Yeah. And do you prefer a coffee meeting in person or a Zoom or Teams meeting virtually?
Both.
Are you looking for
room for both?
Fantastic.
Room for both.
And what do you think is your biggest lesson from a failed program?
Fixed price agile.
There you go.
We'll come back to it.
And just a very final, broader purpose, because we talked a lot about some of the problems, some of the shortfalls, and about the solutions, about how we might pull that together. But what gives you optimism still about the government technology program and public sector technology program wider?
So the optimism for me lies in, I think DC are taking more of a front approach to how, the blueprint for modernisation and the roadmap for how digital modernisation should be happening. And I sort of feel that's taking the GDS thing a couple of steps forward. So that gives me great optimism. I think if we can then start to weave in, well, how do we use that to develop better cross-government data sharing? I think that's a crocodile everybody is still wrestling with. And I think we can make it better, but it will take a will. Just thinking from a safeguarding, safety of children perspective, there's so much we can do to exchange information that would help that. Just as one example. So. I think that's probably the big thing for me is, how do we do data sharing better? Bit of optimism around there is a desire to do, digital transformation. By the way, transformation is a word I don't like because
so we'll put that second too.
I genuinely don't think most of it is transformation. I think most of it is sharpening the edges.
Yeah.
There isn't much genuine transformation.
That's interesting. Well, look, Kevin, thank you so much for taking the time. Really enjoyed it. And there's lots of food for thought there. I think I said, well, I think what we've come up with that is it's, there are issues around procurement, clearly, but there's lots of scope for improvement. And there's a path for it as well. It's about collaborating. It's about making sure there is a good, healthy relationship between government, system integrators and SMEs. It is about making sure that we continue that upskilling program, which I was heartened to hear sounds successful within government, to make sure they're asking the right questions in the first place. But
no, that's right, Paul. In future podcasts, we'll go over some of the elements that we've discussed today, and then we'll bring other experts in to talk about them in greater detail around data, cyber, around AI, procurement reforms, and we'll bring these people in from government, industry, and small businesses as well.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed the first episode of the Digital State podcast. If you have, please do the usual things. Subscribe to our channel, share with all of your friends and colleagues, making sure that you let everybody know. But by the way, do comment as well what you think of the conversation. If you've got any suggestions for other topics that you want us to discuss, and indeed any other guests that you'd like to hear from, because we want to make sure that we're hearing from the very best of the big businesses like Kevin, the very best of SMEs like Assad, but also civil servants, ministers, people that are used and are affected by any digital program within government, because we want to get this right, and we're really interested to see what the future holds. So thank you once again for joining us. See you the next time.